On today's episode, I sit down with Ben Leonard. Ben is an exceptional entrepreneur who is absolutely fast-paced, carving a path into everything from his new Ecom brokerage, all the way from exiting his Amazon FBA business and coming from a highly technical and professional space. Really exceptional guy, someone that I gelled with really well and just on a philosophical level connected with deeply. The way Ben breaks down points and gives insights is very impressive. I felt I learned a lot from sitting down with him, and I hope you do too. Hi, and welcome to Successful Scales, the show where I interview now successful professionals about their journey and try and garner insights onto any tips that can be applied to your business at home. Whether it's financial freedom or the exit of your company, wherever your journey may take you, the idea here is to simply learn from those who have done it before. I hope you enjoy and you get some value out of this. Buckle up and enjoy the episode. Ben, welcome to an episode of Successful Scales, mate. Thanks for coming on just while my dog also starts barking.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Awesome, mate. Well, we've connected over the last sort of month or so. We've had some great conversations. Honestly, every time that we sort of get off a call, I always feel like I've learned something new, and I'm looking at it in sort of a different approach. And so, it only made sense to get you on here and share a little bit about your story. I mean, I'd love you to tell me, before we jump into it, I'd love you to tell those listening at home a little bit about yourself so that they can understand who it is they're listening to. And I've got tons of questions on a lot of the impressive things that you've already achieved and where you're heading to.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks very much. That's a really kind intro. Yeah. So I'm Ben. I got into e-commerce in early 2016, late 2015. My background before that was not e-commerce. It wasn't even business. I didn't know that there was an entrepreneurial spark inside of me until I got very ill with a heart condition. My background is ecology. I was working in the oil and gas industry. So I'm from a town called Aberdeen in Northeast Scotland, where oil and gas is the big industry. And my job was, I was an environmental consultant. I was helping oil and gas companies stay within the regulations on the one hand, and on the other, I was helping the regulators make the regulations. And so by qualification, I was a whale and dolphin and a marine ecology nerd. And I enjoyed my job, but I got really ill and I had to stop doing, for about 9 months, I had to stop doing all of my fitness hobbies. So no more CrossFit, no more boxing, no more lifting silly heavy weights around whilst I recovered. And I needed something to do on the one hand, and on the other hand, I wanted that thing to be connected to those hobbies, even if I couldn't do them. And my then girlfriend, now wife, was studying and she was really busy. And she encouraged me to pursue this idea that I'd had previously, which was to create a brand of fitness equipment. A couple of years prior, I'd been in a CrossFit session. At the end of the session, somebody had said something like, "Oh, we beasted it today." And I was like, "Beasted it, beast gear. That would be a cool name for a fitness brand." And I forgot all about it until like a couple of years later. I'm very ill. I'm tidying out my gym bag, looking at all this equipment that sadly I can't use. And I thought, I could do a better job of this. I could do that beast gear idea. But at this point, I had no idea about e-commerce, selling on my own website, let alone selling through Amazon. And so the process of learning began.
Beautiful, mate. Fascinating so far.
Yeah, it was it was a process of my scientific background in ecology really helped, actually, because in science you have a hypothesis. You test it, you look at the results, you analyze the results, you think about what they mean, and then you change something else and you run another test or another experiment. And that was really helpful in the development of the brand, because I don't like to say that it was learning by doing as such. It was because it was a bit more advanced than that, because there's a lot of analytical scientific thinking behind it. But that really helped when you got no background in something. Just the idea of, well, let's try this and see what happens, and analyze it and then go again, really helped. And it turned out I was pretty good at it. I grew that brand for 3.5 years. After about 2 years, I quit my job, scaled it to mid 7 figures, and then sold it at the end of 2019.
Congratulations. I mean, that in itself would be a pretty interesting thing to sort of dig into, that experience of, look to sell the business. But I mean, keep going, mate. I'm seriously gripped with the story. I got one question for you though. You had so your whole background is effectively and like extremely noble in helping the environment. What, and you said that you were really happy in the job that you had, and it was only based on the heart condition that you moved into this. Was that ever sort of a drawing factor to stay within that sort of space? Like,
I mean, the impact, I still want to have a positive impact on the environment overall in my life. And, to step aside from e-commerce for just a moment, long term, it's an area that I want to get back into in a slightly different way rather than working in that industry later. But one of the reasons I stayed in my day job probably longer than I had to was purely security, right? There came a point though, which I thought the opportunity of quitting my job and taking the business, Beast Gear as it was, on was just too great. And I was very lucky because I told my boss in my day job that about the project. She knew about it. She was very cool. She thought it was great. And then I went to her and I said, this could go somewhere. I need to give this a shot. And therefore, I'm handing in my notice. And she said, hold that thought. I'm going to give you a year's sabbatical. So if this goes wonderfully, congratulations, we'll never see you again. If this doesn't go wonderfully, you got your job back. And not many people have such an awesome boss as that. And so that safety net was phenomenal because it took the pressure off. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because sometimes, just as human beings, I think we operate really well when we're under a little bit of pressure, a little bit of eustress, right? On the other hand, there's a good argument that says that when there's no pressure, we're free. It's like, when you just had a good massage and your shoulders relax and you feel free to operate at your best self at capacity. It's like the top sports player. Like if you've got a footballer or a soccer player who is freely scoring goals, they feel relaxed and free and confident and they keep on just crushing it. And so when I had that safety net for that last year and a half of the business before I sold it, I absolutely crushed it. So it was an interesting one. It was kind of a reflecting back on that. I learned that I do operate pretty well when I'm under a bit of pressure, but actually I think I operate even better when I feel free.
It's so sorry. I laughed before because we were just talking about eustress. Like literally an hour ago, we were sitting with a consulting team and we were talking about the optimal area to yield the biggest output is going to be not when things are very easygoing and there's there's not too much of a flow state, but like you're not challenged, versus on the other end where you are pushed to your nth degree. It's also going to create that negative, well, I can't actually achieve this. And it's finding that that perfect sort of symmetry of what's working for you. And it sounds like you found it. But wait, I want to step back one more thing, because I think that this is something that people listening might be going through or might have gone through at different stages. And I know mine was a little different, but you were in this position where you had a great job. You were living, for most people, probably what is a dream outcome. You've studied a certain thing, you've reached a level where you love your boss, you've named that several times here today. So everything's going great and you're making, I assume, decent money and everything's nice and secure. You go and you start Beast Gear on the side here. What was the journey like from a sort of a push-pull perspective of like, I'm going to leave, like you said? I mean, it's amazing. You got the sabbatical and that's the dream. And, you'd be foolish not to take an opportunity like that. But how long did it take you to sort of bring that up? Or did it become a real thought for you that you might jump into Beast Gear full time?
Yeah, I think with the benefit of hindsight, I probably left it too long. And I ought to have approached my boss about that even earlier than I did. Because just looking back,
what was the time? What was that timeline for you? Months, years?
So I started the business in early 2016. I quit my job, or I took the sabbatical mid 2018. So we're 2.5 years in, and then I sold the business late 2019. So that final year and a bit when I was full time on the brand was when I really crushed it. But really, with the benefit of hindsight, I ought to have gone to my boss 6 months earlier, because of the impact it was having in terms of just, you know what it's like, you got your day job, so then all the rest of your time is spent on the business. Now that didn't matter at the start because my wife was studying at the time, but then later on she's finished studying and I'm now antisocial because I'm working during the day and then I'm doing my own business evenings and weekends. And as we all know, the dream of the e-commerce business and the 4-hour work week doesn't quite exist. And so I ought to have done it earlier.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I walked away from an Amazon business before this experience, and I probably sat for 9 months going back and forth, like, the risk of rebuilding versus sticking to that and seeing where it goes to different again. But I feel like for a lot of, I mean, from the people that I've spoken to and asked a question like that before, I feel like everyone sort of has the same thing as to, I probably waited that little bit too long to do it. And so what if any tips would you have, and I've got a few off the top of my head, but like to someone going through that, like how do you avoid that? How do you avoid making that mistake as a second time?
You have to ask yourself, you have to ask yourself, what is the upside? That's pretty obvious, right? The upside is you quit your job, it all goes fantastically well. What is the downside? But then crucially, can you live with the consequences of the downside? And for me, I don't think I was asking myself quite as eloquently as I've just put it, but indirectly, I think I was thinking about all these things, right? And I was thinking that, if I quit and this doesn't go well, because this was before I knew that a sabbatical was even on the table. She offered it to me, right? I was quite naturally risk averse. And I think as I've grown into this entrepreneurial mindset, which I didn't realize that I had stored deep in my brain, I have become a bit more of a risk taker. Because I think as entrepreneurs, we are risk takers. But it took me a while to get those entrepreneurial shoes to fit. And now, the me now in the same situation would have quit earlier and taken a bit more of a risk on it. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And that mate is what they call experience, right?
Precisely.
You go through that as well. And like the risk, the perceived risks sort of from external factors or from someone who's not been through that before may seem greater, but for you, it's like, it's very calculated. Like, can I afford to invest this amount of time? Is that time investment worth the potential yielded return? If yes, and it's making my life better from a fulfillment perspective, from a happiness perspective, from a financial perspective, and everything else that is sort of important to you at your core, then those are sort of the decisions you start to shift into. Whereas I don't know, I feel like and I still feel like sometimes, but you sort of you're getting to the next level, but you're making it up, you're making the next thing up as you go along until you build a system around it and you actually quantify what that is.
Yeah, precisely. And the more that you build the system and the more you quantify it, the more confident you become. And so you build that experience, which is why when we're looking back in hindsight and stuff, it's important that, because I think, again, as entrepreneurs, I think we're naturally quite hard on ourselves. It's important that we give ourselves a break and say, well, we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't have the experience. Now we do. So if we make the same mistake again, then fair enough, tell ourselves off about it. But when we're looking back about our former selves and where we were at a point in time, it's important that we're not too hard on ourselves for those things.
Totally. And yeah, to personify that for everyone listening who's gone from a cash to an accrual basis, everyone's done it. Everyone has made. Did you make that mistake?
Well, very early I did, but luckily I moved to a fantastic accountant very early in the business who got me going on accrual accounts, which meant that then later on when it came to selling the business, it was a lot less painful.
Yeah. We probably had the first 3 to 4 months, and we learned pretty quickly too. But sometimes you'll hear of people years down the track, or when they're trying to sell the business, and it's just like, whoa, like that's a lot of work.
Yep, it certainly is. I mean, selling your business in any case is an intense time. And so add on to that the headache of changing your accounts around from cash to accrual. yeah, please don't make that mistake.
Yeah, exactly. If you take anything from this conversation, it's that.
Yeah.
No, but you know what? I've cut you off a few times because I've just been so fascinated by sort of your
Alright.
journey. But keep going. So you were up to the part where you were talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably pick up from where you
I
left off.
Yeah, so I started the brand early 2016. So I was my customer, right? And I strongly believe, and there'll be people that disagree, and that's fine, but I strongly believe that in e-commerce, if you're building a physical products business, it ought to be a brand, and ideally, it ought to be a brand that you are passionate about, so that you have the get up and go in the morning to get up and make this happen. And so I created a brand which was a suite of products which solved problems for a particular group of people, in this case, fitness fans. And there were a couple of sub niches within that, I guess, within fitness. But anyway, I developed this suite of products and scaled it by building out the brand across the UK and Europe. And then we got into China and then into Australia. And then by early 2019, I was starting to have thoughts about selling, because I had come to understand that selling an e-commerce business, there were whispers in the community, right? That, this is actually, just a sidetrack for one moment, it's absolutely bonkers, isn't it? That the internet has existed for decades now, and buying and selling physical products has existed for an awfully long time. And yet, up until relatively recently, the idea of buying or selling an e-commerce business was just not even thought of, because people considered that if it didn't have a door and a roof, you couldn't do that. But early 2009,
it's still today a problem.
Yeah.
When you look at like sources of funding, unless you have a brick and mortar location, your limitations around who you can lend from for growth capital into inventory runs or marketing budget. I mean, it's still not quite accredited. It's still playing catch up.
Yeah, absolutely, and it will get there. But anyway, early 2019, I'm hearing whispers that this might be doable, and I'm starting to do some sort of back of an envelope sums of what my business could be worth. And I was thinking, well, to get that amount of money out of the business, I would need to keep working at this for a long time. And just considering the risk versus reward, how much of the business was tied up in one sales channel, Amazon, albeit across multiple marketplaces, and how much was I running around like a headless chicken? And if I wanted to make this more sustainable, what would I have to do? And the answer was build out an enormous team and all that good stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at that point in my life, my wife was pregnant. We wanted to move house. And I came to understand that I could make a significant change to our life and our security long term by selling the business. And so I began to do my research. And this was early 2019. You got to remember that this whole thing of aggregators buying e-commerce businesses had not come to be. Thrasio formed in September 2018, and I sought out a broker, and over the course of that year, got to work on getting the business ready to sell, and sold the business at the beginning or the end of Q3 2019. And so that set me off on the next stage of the journey, if you like, which is my three hats, I suppose. Whereas when I started the first brand, Beast Gear, it started as a hobby. But that taught me how to develop a brand into something valuable and then sell it. So now I'm building brands to sell them, partly because I love it, and partly because I believe that I still need to be on the ground as an e-commerce seller myself in order to do the things with the other two hats. And one is I consult with people, and one is I help people get an exit too with my brokerage. And so that's what I'm doing. And looking back, it's if you told me in 2015 that this is what I'd be doing now, I wouldn't have believed you. So I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity that this e-commerce and Amazon, I suppose, in particular, has given me and many others, and especially during these crazy COVID times, certainly grateful to be in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an absolutely wild ride over the course of the last, I mean, definitely since we hit the new year, there's been more VC capital brought into the space, or venture capital is VC, into the space in the first 2 months of the year than it was the whole previous year all up. So it's been insane, and it's definitely a very fortunate industry to be in, and at the growth and the pace. Question for you, because you are very clearly meticulous and methodical in your approach to how, we're having a conversation for like 10 minutes before we push record that was all about like the different ways in we are effectively architecting how we as people look and feel on what's important to us today. Like, we both went through similar phases of CrossFit and putting on a lot of muscle mass and being injuring yourself to finding something now that's actually long-term and works. And that's been a process through education and getting us to there. Now you've started, I don't want to make assumptions here, but I'm getting an idea that you're effectively building what strikes me as like a very intelligent flywheel, where on one hand, so I'm going to make assumptions here. So you can correct me about all of these wrong assumptions. But so you're going to start and continue to build Amazon businesses with the objective to sell, because you've done that effectively, and that keeps your effectively finger on the pulse in understanding and being able to then support your consulting clients. And then also, as you're going through this journey, you're also looking to then help businesses for exit and effectively create what will be, likely the biggest single payday that they'll see, or, depending on how the next one and the next one goes. So you're building, for lack of a different term here, like a flywheel here. So you're building solutions that are supporting each other and providing additional insights, and it becomes its own sort of growth trajectory too.
Yep, was that absolutely right? And I love the word you use there, solutions, because I think that needs to run through everything. So if you're building a brand, your brand ought to be positioned such that you are discussing the problem which your customer avatar faces, and your products or services are providing solutions to those. And I'm keeping that theme running through everything I'm doing. So I understand, being an e-commerce guy myself, I suppose, having been there and done it, the pain points that people have. And I like to think that I can offer solutions to those, whether that's in the consulting side or the brokerage side. And flywheel is exactly the right way to put it. Once the flywheel starts turning, provided you keep your eyes open and you don't get sidetracked by shiny objects, and you don't make too many mistakes, the flywheel will keep turning. If anything, it'll just get faster and faster.
So I'm glad that I guessed it right, or at least in the right direction here. Because that brings me to my next question: is there like in your head, is there not an end game? I'm actually reading The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. Great book for anyone listening, or
not read that.
It's fantastic. Really, really great. It talks about the infinite game of business, where, we're not building, if you're building a finite company, let's say a VC would build there's supposed to be a big sale or an IPO at the end of it. There's an objective over a period of time, and that's a finite game. Whereas the infinite game looks at everything sort of beyond that, like the impact to humanity and the jobs that you're creating, and like what actually happens there. Anyway, not to get into that too far, because I'm getting sidetracked from the question, and that is, do you have an end sort of game in mind in terms of how, either how you want your life to look, like the hours of work that you want to invest, or the different types of businesses, or is there an ultimate kind of direction that you're heading in, or this is the intention for right now?
It's a mixed bag, and I don't like sitting on the fence, but I'm going to somewhat sit on the fence. So to wind back the clock a bit, when I started my first brand, there wasn't really an end game. It was a hobby as a bit of a distraction from the health things that were going on at the time. When it became apparent that I could sell it, then there was an end game. On the one hand, I still have some end games, building some brands to sell. But on the other hand, there are other parts of my business life which don't necessarily have an end game yet, because there are branches to the tree which have not yet grown, and we don't know what's we don't know what the leaves look like yet, right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know necessarily. I've got ideas for where ecom brokers is going. We're looking at building out an accelerator, right? Like a done for you managed route to an exit. What will happen with that, and where will that go? Well, we don't quite know yet. Will we end up selling ecom brokers? Well, we might, but what time frame is that got? We don't quite know yet, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I think a lot of people feel like there has to be an end game.
Mm-hmm.
I think this ties in somewhat loosely, but a little bit, with something that I like to think about, which I'm guilty of not doing, right? But it's just in time learning. So I think sometimes we focus so much on having this map of exactly where we're going and what we need to learn and what we need to know right now, that then we lose focus on actually what do we need to do right now, rather than focusing on what's coming further down. Having said all that, I do have a slightly longer term plan, which is that right now I'm in this e-commerce life. I discovered an entrepreneurial spark like five or 6 years ago, and that spark is still burning, but I still have a deep passion for the environment and nature. And I want I want my obituary to be about having had a positive impact, not just in terms of, being a nice guy and being good at business and teaching his kids about it, etc., but in terms of my impact on the planet. And one thing that upset me when I was studying ecology was, so I did quite a lot of work experience in various environmental NGOs, full of great people with great ideas, mostly academics. And the problem is, they spend a lot of time standing on the sidelines, waving their arms in the air and shouting quite loudly, and not a great deal of time getting stuff done. And there's a beer company called Brewdog, and I don't agree with everything they've done. They're from my hometown in Scotland, but boy, do I admire them. And they're worth billions now, right? And sometimes you need some entrepreneurial spirit to just get stuff done. These guys have just bought up you can Google it now if you're listening, Brewdog. They've just bought up a vast area of wilderness in Scotland, and they're going to reforest it, because this area has been destroyed by deforestation. Most of Scotland has. Most of Scotland, people say it looks beautiful. It's actually just a vast wasteland of heather. It used to be covered in Caledonian pine forest. And these guys have just bought this, and they're going to rewild this. There's also a very famous Danish billionaire called Anders Povelsen. He made his money in clothing, and he also owns massive estates in the north of Scotland, and he's rewilding them. And sometimes you need a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit to just get stuff done. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to be a billionaire and I'm going to do all this. What I am saying is that once I've perhaps burnt through a bit more of this entrepreneurial spark in terms of having my own businesses, I would love, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 15, not sure yet, and that's okay.
Yep.
To get back involved in the environmental side and help these NGOs in that kind of way. And I know we're getting a bit more big and philosophical, moving away from
No. This is great.
That's my general thought process. And a guy who I admire a lot, who's been an influence in helping me to sort of think about that, not directly, I never met the guy, is a guy called Donald Miller. He wrote a book called Building a Story Brand, but he's also done a guide on creating a life plan. I think you can only get that if you join his business university, Business Made Simple University, which I joined. And that has been a big help to me.
Mate, I've got to say, I was sitting here the whole time, and I don't know if you pay attention. I was just sitting here nodding along. When that time comes that you look to build some sort of something around the environment and solving a lot of the world's problems, speak to me, because I feel like you more or less summed up how I often position my objective. It's, for right now, it's how do I help create more fair paying jobs? And that's sort of aligned with my philosophy that I want to have an impact on humanity. This right now is exciting, but it's a means to an end. When you can get to that point where, you are secure and you can focus your attention, you have that safety net to really focus on solving bigger problems. And there's a book I'll recommend to you if you haven't read it already, but I think you get a lot out of it. It's called 80,000 Hours. It's a free book. I won't talk too much about it, but it's about the fact that the average person has about 80,000 hours of work hours in their career. So it's how do you invest your time most intelligently in an effort to have the greatest impact on humanity. And so I read this book when I wanted to go into the not-for-profit and NGO space. And one of my friends recommended that I read it. And when I did, I realized that I hadn't learned what I need to learn commercially to start to actually have true impact,
Yeah.
in a nonprofit world. So, it just really resonated with me hearing you sort of express the plan. And, I would say the same as well to echo your position. You get a lot of pressure, especially if you speak to anyone who's sort of in the VC space, as to like, well, what's the objective? What are you as a business? Where are you going? What's the,
Yeah.
and I can tell you that if that was put on me and we'd taken on investment, then there's no way that we would have had a consulting company today that's created 22 jobs and helped probably over 50 businesses now in building their operational infrastructure. And that was because we knew that it was good. We knew that this is something that was needed, but we weren't exactly sure at the time. And we expanded. And so, there's so many branches that I know I don't know when we talk about, when you were making mention before of planting trees and you don't know exactly how things are going to grow. But yeah, I don't, I think it would be crazy for someone to ultimately say, unless they're playing the real fine art game and I just want to sell this company and I want it to do X amount by this period and that's the end of it. If that's not your objective, then it's very, very hard to pin down like what is the big overarching long-term vision 10, 20 years down the line. I struggle with that too. And maybe it's because I'm still younger in my business career, but
And it's
I feel the
okay
same.
for us to say we struggle with it. I think that's the key thing. We need to, I think, again, as entrepreneurs, right, we don't like to admit that we're struggling with something, but as soon as we do, or not even struggling, but that we're, I don't know, we're sitting on the fence, or that we're saying we're not 100% on what it looks like or what the end game is. But as soon as we allow ourselves to think like that, then we feel a lot more free. And that brings us full circle back to that balance between the relaxation and the feeling of freedom, balanced with just enough stress and pressure so that we perform at our best.
Mate, you should be the host here, not me. That was a beautiful connection to the point. But yeah, I mean, I love it. I love your position. It really just resonates with me on a deep level, and I feel like I get to have more of these conversations with people that I really feel like that connection to on that level. But I still feel like more people need to sort of be hearing that it shouldn't just be about the money that you'll make, and that's sort of a driving thing. I mean, it's okay if it is, but I think that the more people that sort of hear that position and see the success that you can have when that's not the driving outcome, it has a lot of value in my opinion there. But also the fact that you're saying that anyone who's telling you they've got all the answers, it's just, that's when I'm skeptical, the fact that,
And you know what's interesting, right? That I'm still well connected to the environmental community, and the people listening to this are predominantly people in business who I'm sure many of whom care about the environment. But there are cynics within the environmental community who would say to me, they haven't said to me, but I know they would. They say, well, Ben, why are you doing all this business stuff now then if you care so much? Well, the answer is I do care, but also I'm not entirely responsible for all this stuff. And I just, on a personal, perhaps somewhat selfish level, I have this entrepreneurial side of me that I want to experience for the next, call it a decade. And then there's the next part of my life. And actually, I feel like I can't give full justice to that next part of my life, those other environmental ambitions, until I fulfilled all these business ones. Because A, I'll always have that burning in me, oh, well, why didn't I keep doing that for longer? And B, I've still got tons to learn now in business that I can then apply down the line to these other passions. And again, just look at what the guys in Brewdog are doing. Those guys, they know quite a lot about business. But if they hadn't learned all that, they would not be in the position to be having the impact they're having now. And the same with Anders Povelsen.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the journey. Is how do you acquire that knowledge to take it to that next level and that next level? And Yeah, I'm with you. Like I'm trying to do as much as I can today that fits with inside of my values, and that is the creation of jobs is central to that. And I would also argue that everything you're doing also is creating more opportunities for more people too. You consulting to a business that then hires several staff or creates more opportunities from the logistics create, like, that's the whole, for me, that's a big driver at the moment. But ultimately, once commercial needs aren't really a passion or a need anymore, then yeah, onto the things where you can have even more impact fixing an industry that doesn't attract the best talent. Let's face it, it doesn't pay good money. So why it's going to be less competitive. That's in 80,000 hours, it talks a lot about going too early and not having the level of challenge and pressure and competition that you experience in a commercial world where it pushes you to be the best.
Yeah, completely. I mean, look at what you're doing in the job creation side and the fair pay side. It's changing lives. And equally, again, and without wishing to sound, I don't know, arrogant or whatever, uh, I, I like to think, and I feel like it's true, with ecom brokers, we're helping people go from incredibly stressed, running around like a headless chicken potentially in an e-commerce business, to suddenly they're financially free. They're potentially very wealthy. And now they have the opportunity to go and do even more things, which will then have more of a positive impact on the planet or the world, humanity. And so I think all of what we're doing it's about creating opportunity. It's positive feedback. The more that you create, the more you create. The creation begets more creation and more opportunity for everyone.
Absolutely. Could not agree with you more on that. And that's, yeah, I think that's a big part of the inspiration that that goes behind it. So, mate, I know we don't have a whole lot more time here today, but I just want to say, mate, I have thoroughly enjoyed our chats.
Absolutely.
Um, I mean,
Yeah,
like
me too.
every time we've sort of connected, it's always, it's been over a whole lot of broad stroke topics, but it's just super
Yeah.
interesting, super stimulating conversation. Like I'm sitting here energized. So thank you.
Yeah, me too. I think those are the best chats, is where you come away. I think, and I hope you're not embarrassed by me saying it, but I feel like there are two types of people. If we're going to use a plumbing analogy, there are radiators and drains. And I know that people listening to the podcast come away, because I know I do when I listen to your show, feeling energized because you're radiating that.
Mate, thank you. It's such a nice compliment. Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I hope so. But
Yeah, definitely.
that's, yeah, mate. I really I'm lost for words. So thanks. Um, Mate, it's just such great wisdom, I feel, has sort of come out of your mouth today, and the way you sort of approach problems. It's meticulous, it's methodical, it's you're you're approaching it in a way that almost creates real order to everything that you sort of step forward to. And one of the quotes that we have on virtually every single presentation deck that we send out in the consulting business, it is, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first four sharpening my axe. And
Mm.
I feel like, you really embody the planning perspective of everything that you're stepping into. And, it's that intentional growth that, fosters the evolution of that flywheel. So, just for anyone listening, I just feel like that it really resonates with me. The advice that you're giving is something that, I'll either give myself or I really take on myself as well. I think that that's the devil is in the detail of the planning. And so getting those structures in place and being organized from day one, as opposed to, sort of just figuring it out as you go along. Yes, just in time learning. Like, you didn't need to, well, that would be a bad example. I was going to say you didn't need to learn how to sell a business before you got into business, but I would actually argue that that's not the
Yeah,
case. Everyone
yeah,
should
you do.
everyone should know what that looks like, because then you can make better decisions on, do I want to build a business to sell it? Do I want to build a business as a cash flow lifestyle business? Do I, what is the end outcome?
Yeah, there's a balance, isn't there, between what I mentioned before, just-in-time learning, and trying to navigate your way through without a map. And I think that it's up to each individual person in their business to understand, right, is this something that I need to know now because it's part of the map, or is this something that it's not really part of, I know where I'm going, and this is specific detail I can learn later, right? There are two different things there. And an important part of the map is getting an understanding of a plan for selling your business, or at least being broadly aware of the potential. And there's a great book called Built to Sell by a good guy called John Warrillow, which helps people to set their business up such that even if you're not going to sell it, a happy side effect of having your business set up nicely so that you could sell it is that it's so much easier to run. And then the happy side effect of that is, well, look at that, lo and behold, it's scaled much bigger than it would have done. So Built to Sell by John Warrillow is a great book. And understanding what your business is worth now so that you have a reference point for where you are. And then you can say, well, I wouldn't sell it for this, but I would sell it for X, Y, Z. And then you can work backwards from there. That type of thing. It's about recognizing that.
Yeah. And that's clearly like at your core. And one of the things that I get to speak to a lot of incredible people who consistently bring up that exact point is that the ones that have the foresight to plan out the, objective in some way, shape, or form and build that framework around the business decisions, tends to get there a lot faster than someone who, is sort of just trying to figure it out as they go along and saying, oh, well, I've got a business, or well, now I've got 20 employees. Well, now I've got to deal with all these headaches that I didn't foresee, which is just, to be frank, I went through that a little bit. It grew so quickly, and we went from having senior management to middle management to I don't even know how many different layers there are now, and it's a different reality that I live in, and so I'm happy about it. I love what it's meant for me and for us as a business, but I don't know if I would recommend it to everyone, and so. It's that education of, and I don't know if this is what I would do for the rest of my life, like it's different journeys, it's different experiences. It's about understanding to make the right decision for you and what your end outcome is.
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
Well, Ben, mate, thanks so much for coming on. It's been sharp. It's been hard hitting. It's been, like I've said a few times, it's been great. If anyone wanted to get in touch with you about ecom brokers or your consulting or, any other things that are going to be added to your flywheel, probably in the not too distant future, what's the best way to do it?
Absolutely. I'm on all the main social media channels, particularly LinkedIn. You can go to ecombrokers.co.uk. It's the UK domain, but we're working all over the place. You can email me, ben@ecombrokers.co.uk. You can even if you have no interest in selling your business, or you think you might want to sell it straight away, or not for another several years, I'm happy to just help people. Having had the benefit of being there and done it, it disappoints me when people don't get a great outcome because they just don't know what they don't know, and they don't get good advice. So contact me, and I'm happy to have a chat.
Awesome, mate. Well, thank you so much. And it's just a pleasure getting to sit down with you and having conversations like this that leave, me really thinking about, well, what is the next smart decision that I need to make to keep trying to figure out the next thing and the next thing. So it's been great, mate.
Cool. Pleasure. Thanks so much.
Cheers.